So no, I appreciate what I think what Terry's saying. I think I do believe, I think what God is doing in our churches may not be what we were doing maybe in the past. Okay, so I think there's a humility in, I think, thinking about, I can't go where God is not going. And so I just want to and then I also like to see, other people of God who God is stirring to do and to go, that has gone before us. Because I think we're all standing on the shoulders of the people that have gone before us as well. I just want to give you some stories so that'll encourage you. I love the theme. Advancing the gospel together is the theme of this conference. And I'll give you a story. Right now, our church is, we believed that this year God gave us a vision for 2024 was to host the presence of God and host church plants. That was just, and I'll be honest with you, that just came out of nowhere. Like hosting church plants, what does that mean? Well, we were, actually, one of our other pastors met Pastor Juan at this conference a few years ago. And he didn't have he's a gentleman who is declared asylum from China because he was a pastor of an underground church. And almost all of his members were former members of the underground church. And they were meeting in their house, because they were a underground house church, so they were meeting in their homes. But Fairfax County has a new law that puts a spotlight on house churches and very much discourages that and has parking regulations and all sorts of stuff. So we came here, we just somehow sovereignly met him, and our pastors came back, we discussed it, and we decided, hey, why don't you come and join us? We met in an elementary school, we're not a big church. And so let's do what we can to accommodate them here. Then I was at a luncheon, this past year, and a pastor, Pastor Tintin, was praying because he also didn't have a place to meet because the church that they were meeting is squeezing them out, just price, and they're now meeting in the evening. So they were just, asking the pastors in that luncheon if, we could have a place for them to meet. And so then I said, hey, look, why don't we do that? Why don't we, accommodate that? And then somehow we got wind that there was a Japanese church plant that somebody wants to do in the DC area. This is all happening, it's just converging. I just want you to see this is what God is doing, all right? And so, is this a church plant? So we don't understand. Like, we started out as a house church, and then it just kind of grew. Then we borrowed the elementary school. We didn't know anything about church funding or anything like that. So we just got started organically, if you will. So we got word that there's just a great interest. People were playing. So a group of Japanese-speaking people just showed up at our church. We didn't expect them. I don't know why they came to our church, but they just ended up coming to our church. We met with them, and God stirred our hearts. And so I met with a pastor who was flying in every month to meet and try to get a Bible study going of Japanese-speaking people. And it turns out he was sent by the Japanese Association of the SBC. So they gathered together funds to fund this pastor to travel to DC to try to stir up a Bible study. So then through a series of meetings with him and conversations, he's not ready to be called a church plant. They don't go through the traditional church planting route. But there's a person on the ground here who's trying to gather the Japanese-speaking people to see if there's an interest in having a Bible study. So right now, she attends our church, the person that's kind of leading that effort to try to get the Bible study. So we call that probably incubating a church plant, And then while she's doing that, I think there's probably more togetherness we can do to help with that Japanese church plant in this area. But for now, she comes out, and and then we had hosted a international cookout for students that are in George Mason and other places. Past them were about 40 plus, Chinese predominantly, but Japanese-speaking students came out. And so those are some of the efforts that are going on. I just want you to kind of get a wind of what I think God is doing to bring people together. This togetherness to advance the gospel, I believe, is what God, I think, is doing. And I think the Japanese churches, particularly out in the West Coast, I think what a great model of togetherness. That they come together and they decided that I think DC area is a good place to church plant. So they fund and they come together and they pray and they're doing this. And so we're praying alongside, that effort, and their vision is to then hopefully raise up leaders who can maybe potentially even go back to Japan. And right now, why do we think about what is going on? Well, I think part of what we're seeing is, our Chinese pastor who, I was doing a paper on culture, the crossroads of culture and the gospel, and I was interviewing, doing a paper on the former house church members of China in the United States. I thought there was a whole bunch of them actually, because there are a lot of them in our church. It turns out, I was talking to my friends in these big Chinese churches, and they were like, no, we don't have any. No, we don't have any. No, we don't have any. Oh yeah, we had one guy who came through. He was like a bit of a celebrity who was from a former house church, and he was going around had a circuit speaking on that. And I was like, and there's a whole bunch of people, in our church. And the one thing that pastor said to me is, and this is what he said. He says, all the people in our church have passed the test of oppression. They risk their lives to gather to meet, to worship God and to evangelize and to lead others to Christ. They risk their lives. But he said, Henry, they passed the test of oppression, but I don't know if they're going to all pass the test of prosperity. Because they had people fall out, and they had, stop coming to church because, they're working long hours, things like that. And then they're also very concerned about their children, You would think, if you're from you'd risk your life to have a church in an oppressed society like communist China, and yet, their children could grow up and just be just as worldly. So we can't just assume that that's going to pass on to them. And to be honest, we're very careful because, one thing about, the Chinese church and the Hispanic church, one of the things that we've been able to do is we've been able to do children's ministry for them. We've been able to do youth ministry for them. And so we are, because, what we have been able to see, and if the Japanese church, once they grow, then, we can do children's ministry. But again, what Terry's talking about, contextualization, but we can't, it's not like a traditional youth group. It's not it's not a traditional, they belong to other churches. But there's some common things I would say that we all could agree with, okay? Because there's nothing more important than our children coming to Christ. Amen? Amen. Amen. Okay, there's nothing. I could cry, all right? Just seeing it, the numbers of children not coming to Christ. I was in Korea last year. Nobody's going to church. None of the young people are going. So it's not like a second generation problem. It's a problem of young people not going to church now. They're not getting saved. You know what my daughter said to me? She said, hey, Dad, she knows the Bible. She can do apologetics. But she's like, I know God. I don't know if I experience God. That is a tragedy. You know what I'm saying? People are not encountering God. Recently our youth pastor, stepped down. And so Ellen and I, we're like youth pastors. The first thing is what we're going to do? Parents, we're going to get together. We're going to pray. All right? We're going to pray, and we're going to get together. And that's what we're going to do that for, we're just going to meet and pray. We're going to start a prayer chain. We're just going to pray over our youth. All right? Pastors from your other churches, we're going to get together and pray. We're going to pray over your youth. And all these other parents are going to pray over your youth. You're going to pray over these youth, because what I don't want to do is babysit. And so because once they get saved, they just, and their hearts are ignited, right? You almost can like breathe now. You're like, okay, God's got them, right? And then, our mission, but that's what this is. This is the togetherness to advance the gospel. And I would say, I think we can do it, I think we can come together. I think we can pray, I think we can come together even with funding. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, man, if you have a heart to see your second generation come to Christ, and if you have a heart to see them be discipled and multiply so that they can then become, they mature relationally, and then they make other disciples. Isn't that, I think that's what we want, right? And I'm saying is, I think God is afoot. I think God is stirring, us, to come together, churches that understand being culturally different, right, from other, the traditional church, and say, our children feels culturally different. Well, what does that look like? Well, I think God's got the answer. It's not like, God's like, I don't know what to do, It's like, I think God does, and I think He's got, I think a lot for us. But I think we can come together, and I think, you got in the handout some of the things that we are doing. We're trying to have, some of the ideas is, having youth rallies. We can all come and say, okay, at least we can send them to that. Because I grew up back in the 80s, okay? Late 80s and 90s, all right? We had youth rallies, and they came and the Spirit of God moved, and that's where a lot of people got saved. I think we can have DTS of sorts, discipleship programs for our children to come, not only to learn about God, but to experience God. And I think we can have, youth retreats and lock-ins and children's programs. I'm saying is, we can do this together. I'm excited, and I hope that, and I'm here to listen to what people are saying, but I'm here to say, hey, look, I think we can partner together to advance that gospel for our children.